and political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. Kevin, Becca, morning both.
Good
Thanks
morning.
so much for being with us. One story, of course, dominating front page. I can get some other news later on, but let's start with the paper's coverage of the war on Iran. And we're going to start with front page of The Guardian, are we?
Yeah, I mean, the Guardian and the Times both go on this line, Trump demanding unconditional surrender from Iran. But, I mean, it looks as though I think the longer the war goes on, I think it's become more obvious that they didn't really have a plan about how it's going to end or what comes next. You know, it's unconditional surrender. He wants to have a say in who the leader is. It may even be, you know, a religious leader. He's saying because he gets on with religious people. I mean, it's just all so vague, and it's almost like they're kind of making it up as they go along. I can understand, obviously, he does want their unconditional surrender, but there's absolutely no suggestion that Iran is ready to do that, and they're hunkering down, I think.
No, and firing things at the UAE, seemingly, this morning as well.
Yeah, I mean, we just heard that Abu Dhabi airport's been evacuated. You know, the kind of escalation and spread of this conflict is kind of happening at a pace of knots. And to the point about the lack of aim, I mean, just what was it? Was it regime change? Was this about kind of securing us from a terror threat? Was it about nuclear proliferation? You know, and him kind of setting himself up as kind of a friend of the religious. You know, there's that great picture on the front page of the Times where he's being, you know, there's a sort of prayer circle from these kind of various pastors, you know, kind of religious leaders. You know, I thought this was about kind of putting sort of, you know, turning Iran into a democracy, and now it thinks, you know, he seems quite happy that it'll be a theocracy so long as they're his friends.
He said he's not concerned whether a democracy replaces the regime. He says, as you mentioned, I deal a lot with religious leaders, and they're fantastic, he said. But he has said he wants a hand in choosing. He's already cast judgment on what seems to be the most likely candidate, which is Ayatollah Khamenei's son. He's kind of said, what did he call him, a lightweight?
Called him a lightweight, so he was unacceptable.
Unacceptable, right. But that flies in the face of the initial message was, we're handing it over to the Iranian people. It's up to them. We'll do what we need to do, and then we'll leave, and we'll hand it over to you. But that's not, doesn't seem anyway now to be the position he wants to choose. And this
is a very uncompromising message as well, isn't it? That we won't settle for anything but unconditional surrender. There had been some countries that were hoping that it could be wrapped up with some kind of negotiation a little bit sooner, but he's suggesting that negotiation is off the table.
Well, Keir Starmer hinted at it a couple of days ago, didn't he? He said, you know, that he'd like to see him get down and talk again to try and end the war.
David Lammy said the same to me yesterday, that he wanted there to be negotiations. I think the Spanish are leading an effort from Europe to try and do that.
So again, it just shows us another, the gap between the UK and the US on this as well seems to be getting wider, I think.
Yeah, and Caroline Levitt, the White House spokesperson, talking about a time frame now, 4 to 6 weeks. But as we say, the narratives do shift, don't they? We get a different sense day by day. Let's move on to the Telegraph, shall we? Because this was another interesting line that emerged. Their headline, Putin helps Iran attack the US, something that was put to the Secretary of State for War, as they call them now.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of Trump sort of set himself up as a sort of Putin handler, didn't he? That they had this kind of, you know, some sort of rapport. Clearly not, you know, it's very clear now that sort of Russia's been handing Iran these sort of satellite images of kind of US bases, which has obviously helped them, you know, respond to the attacks from last weekend. And what I also thought was interesting is China's role in this. So China had previously helped Iran kind of rearm after the 12-day attacks that we had last year. This time haven't offered Iran any kind of support, and actually been quite kind of cool in their sort of condemnation of what Trump's doing. We know that Trump's off to China at the end of the month, but kind of these sort of alliances and these kind of axis of power, all acting completely unpredictably, whether it's the US, whether it's China or Russia. But kind of, I think, you know, Trump has really kind of put himself as someone who kind of had a relationship with Putin, but very obviously they've been sort of massively supporting Iran being able to respond over the last 8 days or so.
And also the inconsistency here. So on the one hand, you've got Putin helping Iran, but you've got America almost rewarding Russia by lifting the oil embargo. So saying to India, Scott Bessent was saying, yeah, you can buy the oil, Russian oil now, to sort of free up the sort of clogged system right now because of the war has affected oil production. And he's also said, I saw him earlier, saying, yeah, we might expand it, you know, let others buy Russian oil. So on the one hand, you've got Russia helping Iran target America, but you've got America helping Putin sell his oil again, which obviously gives him money to then attack Ukraine. So the whole thing's just really a
I thought,
mess.
Kevin, does this line that Iran is helping, and the Telegraph have written this pretty strongly, like they've got it from US officials, it's not like reports, this is happening, the Telegraph say. Does this complicate the UK position a bit further, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it does, and I think right now Keir Starmer is trying to sort of feel his way through some sort of middle ground, doesn't want to throw his weight in entirely with America, because we know that I think the government thinks it's an illegal war, although they won't explicitly say it. But at the same time, does want to show that they are sort of taking a side, you know, against Iran, but not wholeheartedly backing America. So the whole thing is just is a complete mess.
Well, yeah, and we'll see how that is playing with the UK. But just to say that Pete Hegseth was asked about these suggestions that Putin was perhaps helping Iran, and he said the US wasn't concerned. He said they were tracking everything and factoring it into their battle plan. So he's sort of shrugging that off. But you talk about Keir Starmer kind of trying to tread a line on what the British position is. Let's take a look at the eye, shall we? Because really interesting polling that they have there, talking about attitudes here to strikes.
Yeah, I mean, not surprising, is it, that only 1 in 5 Brits kind of would support any kind of strikes against the regime? And I think there's kind of lots of different reasons. I think lots of people are still kind of scarred by Iraq. You know, it sort of has this long shadow that's been cast over British politics, especially for people on the left. But also, I think we're all watching this war play out on our phones. You know, whether you've got people who are on holiday in the UAE, obviously there's, you know, incredible coverage, kind of wall to wall on news broadcasters. Like, we are seeing the horrors of it, and I can kind of understand why people are incredibly reluctant to get involved. They don't want to send British troops into conflict because we see time and time again the horrendous impacts of it. And also, I think probably people thinking about what does this mean for the cost of living? You know, you were talking about the price of the barrel price of oil going up. We're still, we've still got a cost of living crunch from what's happening in Ukraine. And so, to your point on, the negotiation that Starmer's having to make around what is kind of politically expedient, but also kind of appropriate, what's legal. I don't normally have a huge amount of sympathy for him because I normally think he makes a huge mess of things. But actually, when you're in a war that hasn't got with a purpose, and an electorate that don't want to do it, and seats that are kind of on the edge of being lost to either the Greens or Reform, it's not a particularly enviable job this morning.
Yeah,
is it?
a thought on the Conservative and opposition position, because Kemi Badenoch has gone further than the government, hasn't she, in terms of the UK's, what she would like to see the UK doing, and obviously that doesn't quite chime with what we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, they essentially say that we should be more full-throated in support of America, that we were ill-prepared, really, we should have seen this coming, and yet we're just sending a warship now out to defend Cyprus. But, it is interesting. I still think that the shadow of Iraq, it was over 20 years ago, but it's still there. I think people are still reluctant to say, yeah, we should definitely get involved in another war in the Middle East.
And do you think his argument about the use of British air bases by the US kind of holds? He said no to the initial strikes, but then when British interests came under fire, he said it could be used for defensive reasons. Do you think that is cutting through to the public?
Yeah, it's a very nuanced position, isn't it, that we're now letting them use our bases. We're not using the bases, so they aren't our jets, but we're letting them use the bases for defensive purposes, so not to attack random targets, but to specifically take out launch sites.
We promised other stories. We'll do those in the next hour. We're out of time now, but we'll see you next hour. Thanks so much.
Guys. Thank you.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?